Since some of y'all weren't here last Wednesday, the class that we are going through currently is all about angels and demons. And currently we are talking about demons. But first of all, what I said was true. A lot of the songs that y'all sing, I have never sung them in my life, but I really like them. Wait. Exalted. I've never sung that song before, but I love it.
Until we got this little boy.
I really like that song. So thank you for leading that for us. But last week I failed, I think, a little bit in discussing why we're talking about angels and demons, because it's not really a topic that we hear a lot about. I'd never heard a single one when I was growing up back at Linden. And so, I sort of want to talk about why we're talking about this subject. And the very, very simple answer is because it's real, Angels, demons, the spiritual realm that exists outside of our material realm is very real, it's biblical, and it is important for us to understand what is going on. Because the fact is, the Bible tells us that we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against what? Somebody tell me. Exactly. Spiritual hosts up against powers and principalities in the darkness of this present world. The fact is, good people, in the very beginning, Adam and Eve would have never sinned, would have never been expelled from the garden, and we would not be living in a fallen world if it had not been for Satan. For that first temptation that led to that first sin, to that first rebellion. Because that's what it is. Sin is a rebellion against our Creator and our God. There is a spiritual battle happening all around us. We fight in it every day. The spiritual forces fight in it every day. And so it's important for us to understand, both angels, which are, messengers from God, and also demons, which are, as we're going to talk about tonight, they are our enemy. And last week, we talked a little bit about the origins of demons. We gave 4 possible origins of demons. The first, of course, was that they are pre-Adamic the spirits of pre-Adamic people supported by the gap theory. We talked a little bit about that. We dismissed it. We talked about them being the offspring of angels and demons. We sort of dismissed that one as well. We talked about how Alexander Campbell, in his Millennial Harbinger, wrote about that in the first century they were looked at as the spirits of dead people come back. That's what he claimed that they believed they were in the first century. I thought it was pretty interesting. But what we concluded, what we sort of said was the most probable answer was that they are fallen angels. And of course, that is supported by Scripture in Revelation chapter 12, verses 4 and 9, 2 Peter chapter 2 and verse 4, and then Jude in verse 6. And so, no matter what you believe are the origins of demons, I'm more concerned about their nature. The nature of these supernatural, because they are supernatural, right? And when we say supernatural, when that word comes out of my mouth, I'm not talking about the supernatural things that we see, in movies and things of that nature. I'm talking about things that are more than what is naturally on this material plane that we exist on. We could say that God is supernatural. We don't usually say that. Just because I don't really know why. But it is a supernatural thing that we are talking about tonight. And so I'm more concerned really with their nature. And so I got a few verses that I want us to read together. I'm going to call on the people that I know the names of. Actually, I'm going to call on the people that I don't know the names of. And you're going to tell me your name so that I can learn them, because it's about time that I learn all of your names. So, gentleman in the white striped polo, in the red and striped polo, what is your name? Stacy. All right, Mr. Stacy, could you read Matthew chapter 8 and verse 16? I know Bobby's name. Gentleman in the back in the red collared shirt. What is your name?
Billy.
Billy, Mr. Billy, could you read Luke chapter 24 verse 39? Luke 24 verse 39. And then, ma'am, what is your name? Linda. Miss Linda, could you read for us Matthew chapter 12, 43 through 45? And I will, if we need to, I will, of course, restate the scriptures, of course. But let's talk about what the nature of demons is. And so, Mr. Stacy, Matthew chapter 8 and verse 16, if you will.
When the evening was come, they brought unto him many that were possessed with devils, and he cast out the spirits with his word, and healed all that was sick or were sick.
Okay, so Matthew chapter 8 and verse 16, of course, is talking about demon possession, which we will get into at some point, maybe tonight, maybe next week. But Matthew chapter 8 and verse 16, that was read, that evening they brought to him many who were oppressed, possessed by demons, and he cast out the spirits with a word and healed all who were sick. Luke chapter 24 and verse 39. Mr. Billy?
I'm not, that is in the New Testament.
It is. First book, actually. Third book.
Only standing pages 24 and 39.
Yes, sir.
Behold my hands and my feet, that it is I myself, handle me and see. For a spirit does not have flesh and bones, as you see I have.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. And so in our passage in Matthew chapter 8, what did Jesus call the demons? What was one of the words that he used to describe them?
Spirits.
Spirits, yes. He used the word spirits to define them. And so this will be important here in just a minute. But when we are talking about demons, we're not talking about something that is relative to the material plane. We're not talking about sickness. We're not talking about disease. We're not talking about mental illness, which we will cover a little bit here in a minute. We're not talking about any of that. We are talking about spirits, okay? Then in Luke chapter 24, in verse 39, this of course is when Jesus has just appeared to his apostles, to the disciples. He says, see my hands and my feet, that it is I myself, touch me and see. For a spirit does not have flesh and bones, as you see that I have. I think that this is important to make the distinction with, because the Bible tells us we're not wrestling against flesh and blood, but against something completely different. And Jesus here makes the distinction that, hey, I'm flesh and blood. I am not a spirit. That's something completely different than me. Okay, and so demons are spiritual in nature. Now, Miss Linda, could you read Matthew chapter 12, 43 through 45?
When the unclean spirit is gone out of the man, he walketh through dry places, seeking rest, and findeth none. Then he saith, I will return to my house from whence I came out, and when he is come, he findeth it empty, swept, and garnished. Then goeth he, and taketh with himself 7 other spirits more wicked than himself, and they enter in and dwell there. And the last state of that man is worse than the first. Even so it shall be also unto this wicked generation.
Okay, so thank you, Miss Linda. This is Jesus sort of explaining the nature of evil, and he's using evil spirits that we know are as demons to do so, talking about how they are, in fact, evil. I don't know. I've seen some things, and I've looked at pop culture and stuff like that, and I see where more and more people are trying to make the devil, the demons, into more of a misunderstood castaways, basically. Is what a lot of people are trying to make them into. But make no mistake, that is not what they are. We know from Revelation chapter 12 that in the beginning, some time before the garden, the devil rebelled against God. Today we rebel against God as well. And I think that there is a lesson in that for us. You know, the devil may have done it first, Satan may have done it first, but we continue cycle, throughout our lives and throughout the generations. And so we have the benefit of a Savior. You know, Jesus came, and we've read in Hebrews in our Sunday morning class that Jesus came not for angels, but for us. Right? Jesus came to cleanse us. He came to save us. And so we have the benefit of a Savior. Demons, not so much. They've seen God. They were with Him. And so they don't have that luxury. But the fact is that they are evil. And when we're talking about their nature of being evil spirits, it's very important that we discuss what their purpose is. You know, because if they were just, evil spirits that just did sort of what they wanted, that's one thing. But what is a demon's purpose? Somebody tell me. Somebody spit out an answer.
Demons are jealous because man was created in God's image, and their whole goal, since Lucifer knows he can't ever go back to heaven, a third of the host that followed him know that also. Their goal is to make sure that no man goes to heaven with God either.
That is so true. That is so true. That they want to bring as many people down with them as they can, right? And how do they do that?
But it's interesting that in Matthew 12, the reading, where the unclean spirit goes out of the man, of course, he's using metaphorical language when he says waterless places.
Yeah.
But he's seeking rest.
Seeking rest.
Huh?
Yeah.
Seeking rest, but finds none. So he is an emotional something that is seeking something. Now, of course, this is metaphorical language. He's not, a waterless place to a spirit. What would that be like?
Right.
But he's not finding what he's looking for. So he goes back to the place he was comfortable. So there's some comfort and discomfort in the existence of the spirit.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing to think about, right? That demons are, we've said that they are, they're evil. They are spiritual in nature. But it does not mean that they are without personable feelings. Not person, but personable. That they want, they need, they desire something, right? And what do we all want? We want to be in a place that makes us feel good, right? We want to be somewhere that that we are working towards something better. Unfortunately, to demons, that is sort of out of the question. And so they cannot really find what they need, and so they find what they're comfortable in. And,
Do they think they can win?
I don't know. That is a good question, and it's a question that we're sort of going to ask at the very end of the class, like after demons, after angels, sort of something that we're going to ask. But I'm not entirely sure if they still think that they can win, or if they're just trying to cause as much destruction as possible.
Well, they know they can't go back to heaven.
Yeah.
And maybe some of them realized a little too late, maybe they shouldn't have followed him
Maybe.
out of heaven. They may not have, should have been in that rebellion.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's too late. It's kind of like any consequence. You do something and you go, oh, wait a minute, maybe I shouldn't have done that. I don't know, that's just a personal,
Yeah.
In my commentary it talks about how they're never allowed to go back to heaven.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe some of them wanted to. Maybe they thought, like the personal feeling there, I don't like it here.
Mm-hmm.
So, like Larry talked about, I want to get somewhere comfortable because I know I can never go back to that beautiful home in heaven.
Yeah.
So, when you're angry at something, you usually want to have followers with you.
Mm-hmm.
Misery loves company.
Yeah.
Misery loves company. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Maybe that's what makes them feel better.
I don't know. A lot of the stuff that we talk about, we don't have in the Bible written down that demons find comfort in misery. Comfort in misery. We don't have that in the Bible. A lot of things that we can infer, certainly. A lot of times when we find things about demon possession, there's more than one. We'll talk about that a little bit. Certainly, it's a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about with the spiritual realm, which we have 2 minutes to do. He's telling me to hurry up. It's a lot of the stuff is we're never going to know until we know, right? Until we have that home in heaven, where we will be like Jesus. The Bible tells us that we will be made perfect. I don't know what that's going to be like, but we're not going to know until we know. But I do want to get through just one thing, and that's their purpose, of course. A demon's purpose is to do the will of Satan. Satan is the originator of sin. He is the one that started it all in the very beginning, the one that gave it to Adam and Eve in the garden. He was the one that tempted a third of the stars in heaven, as Revelation chapter 12 tells us. He swept those down. And they do Satan's will on earth. One of the things that I will say is that a lot of times we think about Satan, right? The adversary. That's what it means. Satan means the adversary. We think about him as like the antithesis of God. We think about him as God is, the all-powerful source of good, and Satan is the all-powerful source of evil. Very truthfully, that's completely hogwash. That's a bunch of nothing. Satan is not an all-powerful source of anything. He is a created being with limitations set upon him by God. And no matter what he may try to tell us, no matter what he wants to be thought of as, the fact is he is nothing in the face of God. Right? He is an angel. And if we know anything about angels, it is that they are not omnipotent, they are not omniscient, and they are not omnipresent. Right? We read about in Daniel how Michael had to travel a great distance, right? We read about these sort of things. And so Satan cannot be everywhere in the world at all the time. Okay? He can't be there. For some, he doesn't have to do anything, right? If your life is comfortable, and if your life does not have its trials and temptations, might be wanting to look at your life. Because the ones that Satan has to do the most work for are the ones who are doing what is right. The ones that are doing the will of God instead of the will of themselves, and such the will of Satan. But he can't be everywhere at once, right? He can't do everything. And so he has to have those that follow him. And next week, Lord willing, we will talk about a demon's purpose in the first century as opposed to a demon's purpose in the 21st century. What they do, what they did, how they did it, how they do it, that sort of thing. And we're going to sort of compare and contrast what was then as they followed their purpose as opposed to what is now as they continue to follow their purpose. And so, am I out of time? I haven't heard a bell. Like, if I'm not out of time, I will continue. I will continue to go.
We saved it, he might be giving you
We started late, too.
So we did start late. It's true. So let's go on and let's just ask the question, why? Right? Why does our God, okay, or well, we're talking about the first century. So why did our God, who is all-loving, all-powerful, he loves us unconditionally, why did our God allow demons to do what they did in the first century? This is what, when we read about demons in the New Testament, what do we usually read about when we're talking about demons? Possession, right? When we read about demons in the New Testament, we read about possession. We almost never read about demons in the Old Testament. There's a few references, one about goat demons and such things such as that. But almost all of our knowledge about demons comes from the New Testament. At least, direct knowledge at least. And so, as soon as we get to Matthew, there's demons everywhere, right? We read about possession after possession after possession. And so, why did God allow this to happen? Well, we're going to talk about it. First of all, I want to talk a little bit about the traits of demon possession in the first century. It took many forms. There wasn't really a cut and dry answer to what demon possession looked like. Mary Magdalene, we know about Mary from Luke chapter 8. That's where we first read about her in that gospel. Luke chapter 8 and verse 2 tells us that Mary Magdalene had 7 demons that were possessing her. And so we talked a little bit about company, that demons want company. And so there were 7 in her. There may have been a reason. There may have not been. I don't know. The Bible doesn't really tell us. Matthew chapter 9, and then again in Matthew chapter 12, we find out that some demons cause muteness and blindness. And so physical ailments, things of that nature. Others, like in Matthew chapter 17 and verse 15, simply inflict great bodily harm on their hosts. We read about in Matthew chapter 17 about the boy who was possessed by a demon that would just constantly throw himself in the fire and throw himself in the water. And the demon just constantly trying to hurt him, trying to kill him for whatever reason. And so it was a violent thing. It was a terrible thing that these people had to go through. And, today, a lot of biblical critics will look at that and they will say, well, the boy had schizophrenia, right? Or the mute and the blind people that were possessed by demons, that was just, that was just birth defects. Things of that nature. You know, a lot of times we look at that and we think, well, we don't see that happening today. We have to have an answer that is applicable for us today as it was then. So we look at, you know, demon possession as mental illness. We look at it as diseases. We look at it as physical ailments. We look at it, people try to make the Bible say something that it does not to cope with, you know, their lack of an interest in understanding it, okay? But I will say this. The Bible always makes a distinction between an affliction, be it mental, physical, whatever, and possession, okay? Let's go to Mark chapter 1 and verse 32. Mark 1, verse 32. Now I'll just go ahead and read this. This, of course, is when Jesus is healing people. And verse 32 says, that evening at sundown, they brought to him all who were sick. Okay? They brought to him all who were sick or who were oppressed by demons. And so right here in this very, just one verse, the Bible makes a very clear distinction. If someone was blind because they were blind, Jesus would heal their blindness, right? If someone was blind because of a demon, Jesus would cast out the demon. Jesus made a distinction here. And the Holy Spirit, who guided Mark in writing this book, makes a distinction right here. And so the Bible always makes that distinction. And so, back to the original question. Why did God allow it? Why did God allow it?
I think you answered that question in the very first statement when you described God.
Yeah? What was it?
God's love.
Okay. What would God's love have to do with allowing demon possession?
What does love have to do with your relationship with someone else? You give them the freedom to be their person.
Give them the freedom to be their person. Okay.
He's all loving. How could he not give them liberty
Okay.
to make their choice?
Right. We know that they do have a choice. Right? They do. Even now, I'm sure that demons still have a choice. Okay. Yeah.
They may have a choice on what they do, but they don't have a choice of being good to go to heaven.
Right. It's very true.
The only one that you brought up something earlier, I can't remember exactly what you stated, but if you go back to Job 1:6, Satan can't live in heaven, but he still has access to talk to God. The other angels it never mentions, and if you were talking about why do we know about this starting in Matthew, the 1st century, you go back and you read the early part of Genesis before the flood. I mean, there's obviously such a short time there, but I would venture to say that there was probably demonic possession in those earlier times, but that's such a long period of time. We're talking between Adam's creation and Methuselah and the flood, we're talking about almost 2,000 years.
It's a long time, yeah.
It's a long time. That's covered.
That we don't have
Versus-
record of. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There's so much of history that the Bible doesn't record. Really and truly, we follow one family with the exception of Job, right? We follow one family from start to finish all the way, right? And so there was things going on that we simply don't have a record of.
One thing I found curious, if you went on and read verse 34, the whole thing, it said that he did cast out many demons, but he did not allow the demons to speak to him. So they could have spoke to him, but he didn't allow
He
it.
didn't.
It's think God might have allowed the demons in the New Testament to show God's power?
100%.
Yes, Lord.
100%. Yes. I think the biggest reason that God allowed it, at least in the first century, was to show Christ's deity. Right? Hebrews, we read that Christ is God. Right? First chapter, first few verses, Christ is God. And all of the miracles that we see Jesus do show that in some way, you know. Jesus showed power over sickness. He showed power over objects, over physics, over the elements in nature. He conquered death, which of course was his greatest miracle. But he also showed his power over the spiritual realm. And so next week we will talk about a demon's relationship to Jesus a little bit more, and how he showed his power over demons, over Satan. We'll talk about that a little bit more. And then we will get into how the first century demons, well, they're the same, but how demons in the first century differ from demons in the 21st century. Sort of build that bridge from the first century all the way almost 2,000 years after to now. And so that we will start back with that next week.